Okay, second time a charm. Good morning. Thank you very much for joining us. I am Yori Polari. And I was just saying that we're going to be talking today about food, and especially, shall we say, agriculture, and also ending hunger and poverty. Now, this is a matter that concerns governments, and I have an agricultural expert with me. He's the country director of Heifer International, and he's Mr. Rufus Idris. Mr. Rufus Idris, I beg your pardon. Thank you very much for coming on the program. You and your organization, Heifer International, you have a gigantic task. As I was saying, these are tasks that usually concern governments trying to intervene in, the issue of ending hunger and poverty. It's a daunting task.
It is, sir.
Now, your organization, it has a global spread. I think about 21 countries you were telling me just before we came on, right. And in Africa, around 11 countries. Nine countries. And Nigeria, the operation started in Nigeria, in 2021. That sort of gives us the backdrop. Now, how would you evaluate the current administration, President Tinubu's agricultural program, as has been stated in their roadmap, vis-a-vis what you people are also trying to do, which is intervene to bring down hunger and also to bring down poverty?
Thank you so much, sir, and thank you for having me.
Our pleasure.
The issue of addressing food security challenges, addressing poverty issues, it's a general and collective task. So government have a role to play, the private sector have a role to play, the donor community have a role to play, development organizations like ours have a role to play, and also the farmers themselves and everybody else within that space have a role to play. It's an entire ecosystem that we're talking about. And the good thing is, year in, year out, every government that we've had in this country had always prioritized agriculture as one of the sectors where we can address issue of poverty, issue of food security, issue of even securing people's livelihood. Because you agree with me very clearly that agriculture today is our biggest non-oil sector that we have, that contributes about 24% of our GDP, that employs more than 2/3 of our people, or provides sort of livelihood for them as well.
In Nigeria?
In Nigeria. And also in Nigeria as well, agriculture happens to be that space where every single government have come up with a bold statement and agenda on how they intend to leverage that to unlock the potential within that space. We've had in the past, starting from days of Green Revolution, we had the Vision 2020, we had the Agricultural Transformation Agenda, we had also the Agricultural Promotion Policy. The last government had the NATIP, which is the National Agricultural Transformation Implementation Plan, and now we have the new government talking about agriculture as well. So it's a space where you can address a lot of issues. And if you look at the agenda that in the President's manifesto, it touched some salient areas that need to be addressed critically if we must unlock that potential within the food space. We must get ourselves more food secured. If we must ensure that we can produce locally to feed ourselves. And there's also a bold statement, for instance, in the policy where it talked about import substitution. That's a huge one. Today, our population is growing very, very fast, about at 3.2%. We're at about 200 million people, and we are still growing. We can't even feed ourselves. So we feed ourselves largely from food importation.
There's
so much money out there that's left on the table for farmers that will have been able to bring that back into the system if we empower farmers to produce in country.
If we empower farmers, because anybody who takes a plane ride going anywhere in this country, just looking out the window, will see so much land, especially the longer your journey, the more land you will see. And I'm sure most Nigerians that have been on such flights watching will be wondering what's going on? There's so much arable land, and it just seems to be virgin land. That's the way it looks. Now, part of the problem, I think, is that agriculture, which used to be a profession of pride in the past, suddenly has sort of lost its luster, its glamour. Everybody's moved to where you can't undertake agriculture. They've moved to the urban centers, and they've left, arable land. They've left, the rural areas, And it's just not fashionable anymore. Now, if we don't get everybody involved, or as many people as possible, you spoke about Green Revolution. Back in the day, I remember it was Major General, Lieutenant General Olusegun Obasanjo at the time, as he was so called at the time. He was one of the promoters of the Green Revolution, if I'm not mixing up my timings. And everybody was encouraged that, look, have a little farm, have a little thing behind in your backyard to sort of bring back that whole spirit of we are not strangers to agriculture. Even when we can't do it on a mammoth scale, we will still do it. Now, all of that seems to have gone. And yet, agriculture is the only way out. And here you are, you want to end hunger and poverty. So just bringing people back to the straight and narrow path of this is survival for us is not something that needs to be disdained. Do you think that's a big deal?
It's a very big deal. And that's why there's been a shift in thinking from even calling it agriculture in the first place.
Okay.
To now saying it's agribusiness. It has to make business sense. People go into this to make ends meet, to make some kind of income in a way that is sustainable over a long period of time. So if you look at those green areas and green lands that you see from the flight, there's a lot of challenges why sometimes people are not really out there cultivating them. For instance, one of the highest costs of crop production is even land preparation and land clearing. Government must deliberately invest heavily in providing infrastructure that help to make those land cultivatable for smallholder farmers and people that, because I mention smallholder farmers a lot because 80% of our farmers in Nigeria are smallholder farmers, and they produce 90% of the food that we consume locally and that we produce in country, sorry, not the one that we import. Now, there must be a deliberate attempt, which also I've had in this manifesto, to provide more opportunity to clear more land for smallholder farmers so they can cultivate and grow more foods for us to produce, and also make tractor services more available to smallholder farmers, accessible to them, and also at the price point that makes sense to them. And also going to the farm, sir, you can agree with me that a lot of insecurity challenges lately
That's right.
has really drove a lot of people out of the farm and running back to the city. So the government has also made the boastment saying that they're going to address the issue of security. That's what we talk about the ecosystem. So if the enabling environment is not there, nothing else will thrive. And also the issue of finance. Today, agriculture is seen as a very risky business, and there's not enough money going into that space. Of the commercial loans that went out to agriculture in a couple of years till now, most time you see around 2% is what goes to agriculture, which shouldn't be.
Okay, that's the case in Nigeria. But for comparison, in the best case scenarios, what is the kind of percentage that they are operating with from the government?
In the best case scenario, agriculture is prioritized. Some countries, that's all they rely on. So there's more investment going into agriculture. There's a lot of de-risking being done by the government to ensure that even the private sector and the financiers want to put their money into agriculture. And also it's a system to help increase the productivity level for the smallholder farmers that have a nice reasonable margin to be able to pay back some of those loans, and also building their capacity as well. There could be different kind of instrument.
When you say smallholder farmers, to give us a sense, especially a lot of us that are more urbanized nowadays, what is a smallholder farmer? What, about 1 or 2 acres or less?
That's correct. So smallholder farmer is someone that plow within 1 to 2 hectares of land.
Hectares?
Hectares of land, correct.
Hectares?
Hectares of land. Like 1 or 2 hectares of land.
How many acres are in a hectare? Or is it the other way around?
It's the other way around. So the acre, for instance, is even way, hectare is more bigger than the acre.
Okay. Hectare is bigger than the acre.
Correct.
And you say up to 2 hectares.
1 to 2 hectares.
1 to 2 hectares. And so that would, for agricultural purposes, that is a smallholder.
The smallholder, because there's somebody that's producing, averagely making an income that is not up to the point of becoming a commercial farmer.
Okay.
But again, if we look at it, though, although they are smallholders, some of them even has as low as 0.5% of hectares of land,
okay,
which is even way smaller than even an hectare. And that's why they struggle, because when it's time to require for services, you can't call for instance, a tractor service in a place where you have only 0.5 hectare. The price point when it gets to you will be too expensive. So how do you come into cooperatives? How do you come together and aggregate the demand? So when you come there, you can actually plow and support large expanse of land within that space.
Okay.
And that's what I think is some of the areas. So these are farmers that are currently even considered at a point where how do you even move them from doing 1 or 2 hectares to being more productive?
Okay.
The major issue is not about the size of the land, sir, most times. It's about the yield that they get from that land. Productivity level is very, very low in Nigeria compared to other countries.
And why is that?
A lot goes into that. One, it could be not having the right kind of mechanism or mechanized ways to plow the land.
Okay.
So using a tractor, for instance, to prepare your land can increase the amount of yield that you get from that land by 50%.
But you might not be able to afford it.
Getting the right
So it's
kind of
not all
seed.
about fertilizers,
It's
because
not fertilizers.
a lot of, well, I don't mean it derogatorily, a lot of noise is made about the provision of agriculture, whereas it's not a bad thing, it's not the only thing.
It's not the only thing. And it's not a bad thing, but it's not just fertilizers. It's about how we even prepare the land in the first place. It's also about the kind of seed, choice of seed that you use. It's about the kind of practices that you adopt going forward as well. I mean, how much do you employ good agricultural practice in the system? Do you even know the new system? Also, importantly, affecting yield as well, sir. It's also the issue that we currently see now, the climate change impact on agriculture. Rain now is being delayed later than what it used to be in the past. So if you don't have not enough water in the soil, that also impacts on the kind of yield you're going to get. Because the time that you plant now is being distorted from what it used to be. And also at times we see high drought where there's not even enough water in the soil. So there's soil moisture stress that will never even let your crop provide the kind of yield that you want. And that's why it's hard for us to compete most times with some of the imported foods, because they get higher yield per hectare of land compared to us. So the price point that they can sell might be cheaper despite even importing them to the country compared to what's being produced here. So we must increase productivity to make what we produce here more competitive, and also improve on the quality that's being produced to compete and be able to do the actual import substitution that the government is talking about.
I like how you said even people are moving away from calling it agriculture to now being agribusiness. Because this is the truth that we must face if we're going to get to where we need to be. But to sort of further help us understand it, I was just looking on your website and I saw that the whole, as it were, universe of agriculture is one thing, but you've sort of segmented out an area of interest. So most of your efforts are going to be focused on, look, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, around 5 areas. You're looking at tomato, you're looking at rice, you're looking at poultry, you're looking at small ruminants, and cattle. Of course, that's a big one. Cattle is a big one for us in Nigeria, maybe sub-Saharan in Africa here. So tomato, for instance, is very topical now. Any market person, business person, any housewife will tell you that, as they say locally, tomatoes have become gold. We can't buy tomato the way we used to buy it now. And that is linked to quite a number of situations. I imagine security is one of the big ones, because people are saying that those, there are varieties of tomatoes. There's the, for whatever, I don't know what the proper name is, but there's the Yoruba tomato, as they put it. The ones that we are calling, if you know that one. And then there's the one that doesn't have these grooves in them, that is all shiny and can be all big, and that is thought to be northern tomatoes. Suddenly there's a lot more of the Yoruba tomato, that is now coming into the system, as opposed to what they were referring to as northern tomatoes. Those are the kind of movements that we can't afford to let get out of hand, can we? And is HIFA working on all of that?
Yes, we are. So the choice of the value chain came out of a rigorous analysis and assessment of the country itself. And looking at if we must address the issue of poverty and hunger, what are the value chains of priority when it comes to government's priority, when it comes to where we have a lot of smallholder farmers, women and youth involvement, value chains where we have a lot of private sector processors that are willing to invest more into the back-end reverse integration into the system. Value chain also where we can integrate a lot of technology and innovation to help spring up that space. That's why we come to this value chain. Tomato, for instance, Nigeria today, we are one of the largest importer of tomato paste.
Paste, okay, yes. Okay, yeah.
Of the tomato that we consume in the country, we barely produce 30% of what we consume in the country.
Do we make tomato paste in the country?
So there's some companies in Nigeria making tomato paste,
okay.
And there've been a lot of importation of paste as well.
Okay.
There've been previous government policies to even reduce or to abolish importing the paste and using tomato from Nigeria. But again, it still boils down to one, the productivity level, the amount of tomato that we make per hectare of land, and also importantly, sir, it's the issue of being able to address climate smart impact on tomato production. This year, rain has been heavily delayed. Tomato production didn't do well for those that planted the time that should have planted, so we don't have early tomato coming out as much as should have been within that space. Another critical issue that we see there also is the post-harvest loss that happened. In tomato value chain alone, farmers lose between 40 to 60% because they don't have any post-harvest handling or storage system in place. There should be a cold chain support from the time of harvest to the time of sales or consumption to the end users. We don't have
40
such
to
a place.
60% is lost
in this
simply
country.
because of storage
Storage
deficiencies.
deficiency, access road to get tomatoes out from the farms to where it's going to be processed are critical things that are affecting this particular space. So there's a need for cooperation between both the private sector and also government to increase on infrastructure around tomato production. Access road to get tomatoes out of the farms, storage system from the point of harvest to ensure that we increase that shelf life till it gets to the point of being processed, either by processor or it's being consumed directly as well. And also looking at how we can support irrigation. We rely heavily on rain-fed tomato production in the country. Irrigation is an important part, so we could use solar irrigation
So that is
like
not
we're doing now.
That is not highly developed. This, the irrigation is not as highly developed as you might like. You say we're really depending on the rain.
It's not highly developed. So right now, we largely depends on rain-fed agriculture. When there's no rain, we don't grow tomato. We grow tomato without water, is not doing well. That's why, for instance, we're doing a major project now in a part of Lagos, Badagry. We found a huge number of tomato farmers living within the Atlantic Ocean and the lagoon. They don't have access to any level of fresh water. They rely on rain heavily. The water from the lagoon is salty, the one from the ocean is salty. So we're doing a major borehole drilling there, commercial borehole, powered by solar. Okay. So the farmers can have access to fresh water. They can grow tomato all year round. So these are things that we think can be
build
scaled
in irrigation systems.
Irrigation system for them to feed the tomato production.
Because you've actually just gone into the other question that I was going to ask. We have the time, and we'll also have to make time for callers. That is how HIFA International possibly can collaborate with the Tinubu administration, for instance, because it's also heavy on agriculture. Even right through the campaign, President Tinubu, when he was candidate Tinubu, was it showed that agriculture, as well as another of your aims, human capital development, that is poverty, bringing it down as much as possible. All of that's very important. How do you think, HIFA could, work with the government?
I believe, like I mentioned earlier, that it's an entire ecosystem, which everybody played their own part. Critical areas where we can collaborate are areas that address critical issues that affect the farmers on the production side and also on the market side of those that must develop. First is land preparation. Right now, we're investing heavily in tractors, financing tractors in the country to ensure that farmers can have access to tractors even in the remote areas of this country. And that way they can cultivate their land faster, 40 times faster. They can get 50% more increased yield, and it can be at a price point that they can afford, even cheaper than manual labor of what they produce.
But when cooperatives doing this, helping smallholder farmers, to acquire services of heavy-duty equipment like tractors.
So it was done in the past, but today we have a lot of moribund tractors around the country because of the structure in which it's been managed. We have tractors that have been owned by cooperatives, and the management and maintenance of the tractor was difficult for them. They couldn't access technicians to fix the tractors. They couldn't get access to parts for the tractors. So when it get to a point, they become moribund. They become abandoned in one place, and farmers have to request for tractor services from 4 or 5 states away from them. The cost of bringing tractors down to them already is too expensive. They can't even afford it. So if we can get more tractors available, train more technicians, which we're doing now, training more technicians that can be available in the local areas to service those tractors, to maintain them. Get dealers of those, manufacturers of those tractors to produce parts and make it accessible in hubs within those areas where you can easily get the parts and fix those tractors will really help and go a long way. Area of climate smart agriculture. We all experienced the flood that happened last year. A lot of farmland was washed away. We had serious issue with food during that period. What we're doing differently is how do we encourage more farmers to embrace insurance schemes that work. that can insure farmland for smallholder farmers. Right now, we have over 60,000 smallholder farmers that are going through our insurance scheme program, where we insure their farmlands for flood, for drought, for this, any other natural disaster that can affect their farmland. So it builds the resilience of the farmers to stand climate change impact. Also, weather forecast and advisory. With simple technology, farmers can get to know every single day what will weather look like tomorrow. Will it be raining tomorrow? So I can choose what kind of activity I can do on the farm tomorrow without wasting some of my inputs. Mm-hmm. Will it be windy tomorrow as well? As an area where we can also collaborate and work. Also, access to finance. Government has done some unique thing around the Anchor Borrower program, for instance, trying to get funding to smallholder farmers and tie that to the off-takers that can off-take. But in its implementation, there's still areas that actually didn't work quite well. Interest rate for smallholder farmers must be critically looked into. It must be a product that fits the calendar, the farming season, the calendar of the smallholder farmers. Someone that needed to plant at a particular time of the season, get the input loan 3 months, 4 months down the road, they will not pay back that loan because the input is coming so late, you can't even use them to cultivate anything, and you can't get the right kind of yield to pay back those kind of funds to government at a time when it's time to actually repay back. Areas where we can also collaborate with the government and do some critical work. And also building the private sector side through policies that encourage more investment into the private sector side. We can't support smallholder farmers alone. They don't stay in isolation. They are within an ecosystem. We must also build the private sector side that drives the demand from the smallholder farmers and that see a price point that encourage them more to patronize local production compared to trying to get goods imported. These are serious areas that I think there's opportunity for collaboration with the government and being able to help our smallholder farmers. At the end of the day, we can actually say we can get our country more food secure.
Indeed. And the other thing where you on your own, that is Haifa International, you're also interested in something else government is interested in, which is employment of youths. Talk to me a bit about the youths and women aspect. Those are people that you want to help, and I'm reading in other African countries, it might well be that that's the situation with us in our country as well, how women are being, so these are rural women that are now being made independent, because they are earning, you spoke about the living, but you added as a word qualifying living. I can't remember it now. I saw it on your website.
Living income.
A living income. Thank you very much. That's very, very important. As opposed to just, petty. That people actually have a living income in other African countries. How would that figure here? One is as it relates to rural women, and then two, as it relates to the youths.
So one of the biggest tool and power that we have as a country that we don't tap in as much is our young population. So more than 50% of our population are young people, age 25 and below. And also, these are young people that are tech savvy, that have a lot of entrepreneurial skill and drive that we're not really taking advantage and pulling into. Within this population as well, we have 53% of them either being unemployed or underemployed. So it's a critical set of people that we must embrace and look into. But it's been very challenging to drive or get them to go into agriculture. The average agriculture farmer in Nigeria today is aging to around 50, 60 years old. And the younger ones are not coming in. So we have a disaster building up for us.
We're just waiting to happen.
It's waiting to happen. So we must get young people to be interested to go into agriculture. And to do that, it must be attractive to them.
Sorry to interrupt you, you continue, but I wanted to ask you if that was a global trend or if this is a Nigerian thing where farmers, the mean age is somewhere between 50 and 60. Young bucks are not coming in. Is the pattern similar around the world, or is Nigeria special in that regard?
So we did a special study across Africa and look at that and compare to some other part of the world. It's a trend that we're experiencing across most of the African countries. Mm-hmm. But in some other developed world, it's not the case. And we'll find out what is really happening within that space. Why is that so? Number one is that we do a lot of subsistence farming. Our farming is not mechanized.
Okay.
So the young people want something that will not require the manual, tedious way of agriculture, agribusiness in the country. They want to see something more easy for them to go into, like they've done in that space as well.
Yeah.
So let's see how we can mechanize some of this process. Let them be able to access simple tools or equipment that can reduce the amount of man-hour or power that you require. And that also limits women from being involved in agriculture. Our recent tractor program shows that more women now are cultivating land in the area that we have tractors than they used to in the past. Because now they can access tractors that can help them plow the land, get the land ready, reduce that power that is required. Another part is access to finance. Young people and women most times struggle to access even the available little finance for agriculture. A young person, for instance, have no collateral or no guarantee anywhere to get money. And the banks require you to bring a guarantee or collateral to the table. They can never go into farming because
So these are issues that are being, I believe that these issues are actually, I'm sure the administration also has ideas on these kind of issues as well. You'll continue. Sorry to have interrupted you, but Mr. Balogun in the UK has also joined the program and wants to make a contribution. Good morning to you, Mr. Balogun in the UK.
Good morning, Uncle Yori.
Thank you very much for calling in.
Uncle Yori, what an interesting program. Uncle Yori, first, what I see about our problem in Nigeria is this. You see, in those days, they have this bank for agricultural bank, this, that. No one in Nigeria can tell me that this is the outcome of those banks. That is one way. Number two, you see, this farmer, like your guest said, there are classes of farmers. Okay, the ones that are more entrepreneurial and everything, okay, where do they get this money from? They need to partner with them. And the federal government, what the federal government needs to do is get the fund. But you find out that the fund is there. Unfortunately, it's always paddy, my party man. And some of the big men will put on their agbada and they don't even have a plot of land. And they will tell you they are farmers. These are the problems.
For example, I wish you could see Mr. Idris's face. He was nodding in agreement to all those things you were saying, especially the Agbada farmers. Please continue.
Yes. Please, in about if I'm correct now, 4 or 5 years ago in UK here, they do survey and they found out that, look, what's happening that we're losing our farmers to other European countries. You know what they do, sir? They went to France, woo them with a lot of money and tell them that, okay, they are going to write off some certain things for them. These farmers came in. And the government, the land is there. You know, we have a money problem. The land is there. The government has the land. And it's not your land, but you can farm on it. Anytime I said, okay, Balogun, I'm tired, I'm not farming, Uncle Yori can come in and continue with it because the land is there. So those are the problems we think. Here, they woo the farmers from other places. They go to African countries and bring farmers in. And the state, like my state, Lagos State, I don't see why Lagos State, you can partner with like what they did in the area of the rice. They can do more than that. Now, my brother there talked about tomatoes and all the rest. Sir, come in this place, as you know. We have all these things, plum tomato, chopped tomato, and the whole one. Depend on what you want. And we don't have preservation. We don't have this company that do all these things. The paste is talking about, even paste is no longer in vogue here. Very little people use paste. Very, very little people use it. You have various types of tomatoes in tins and in whole. That's what we need. And here, Tesco, Sainsbury, Wholefree, they partner with farmers. They don't wait for government. They give you, Mr. Onkuyori, they give you money, you farm, and then you work it out. They bring it to their store to sell. That's what they do.
Indeed.
But in our place, everything government.
Oh, well, Mr. Balogun, thank you very much for calling in. And he got to that area. Yeah, I'm going to have to take a break, but he said people are partnering with farmers, yonder abroad. I believe that we also have 1 or 2 big stores that are also doing the same thing. You comment on that, but I must go on a break now. And I'm sure you have a number of things to comment about Mr. Balogun's presentation. Please stay with us. We'll be right back, and we'll continue taking your calls as well.